Let's go.
All right, we're on. This is going to be as raw and authentic as it can be, but a 4.5 year progress between you and me since the last episode and the last podcast that we shared. You were one of my top 10 very first people that I interviewed back when I started this podcast in 2020. And I think I wanted to highlight the journey of the authentic me coming to light was I had just gone through a breakup. I had just gone
Good
through
timing.
I'd just gone through a breakup. I had this belief around all these meanings around turning 30. And I re-listened to our episode late last night as I was preparing sort of questions for this conversation. And you just brought so much wisdom in that very initial conversation between you and me. And you are a profound, and I'm not just saying that lightly, but exceptional relationship coach. I think your ability to understand and then dissect these quite complicated concepts in relationships, your ability to explain that to an audience is just been so profound. So I'm really excited to share this conversation. And ironically enough, I am just coming out of another relationship breakup. But it's all beautiful and painful and challenging as you know, as we go. So Dean Blankfield, welcome to the Authentic Me Show. I'm very, very blessed to have you. How are you?
Thank you, Mel. Good to see you. I feel like we're dear friends that have never met before, and it's been 4 years. A lot has changed, but not much has changed at the same time. It's funny how that works. I remember when I first started in the relationship space, and we connected, and we jumped on that call, and literally that conversation. I still get messages to this day about that conversation. People saying, "Oh, you guys connect so well, and it was such a good conversation." And so I appreciate you as a friend, and sorry to hear that every time we meet, it's because you're going through a breakup, or at the same time that you're going through a breakup.
Don't be sorry, because last time when this happened, though, you actually said congratulations.
Oh,
And
did I?
yeah, you did. And I was like, whoa, who is this person jarring my immune system, and shaking things up. So that was really amazing. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of when things end, there's a lot of beauty that can come with it, should we choose to think that way.
Oh, a broken heart reveals hidden treasures that we never knew existed. You know, one of the strangest parts about life is that the most beautiful times that we have only come because of the pain. And it's it's counterintuitive because you think, oh, we try to avoid pain and seek pleasure. But if you actually think about every one of the biggest, most painful things in your life, I guarantee you that there is a direct correlation to the best things that have happened to you. There's no way that we'd be having this conversation if I didn't have a panic attack when I was 21. There's no way I'd be a relationship coach unless I went through some horrendous relationships. So there's hidden beauty and meaning to every difficulty. And I know, like the Buddhists, when the Buddhists are born, they pray for a difficult life because they know it's within the difficulty that all the beauty is revealed. And that's why in Buddhism, they value the lotus flower because the lotus grows in mud. It grows in the dark, in the difficult, in the hard times, but something so beautiful comes from it. And that's such a good reminder for them. And I think it's a good reminder for us as well. Doesn't make it easier in the moment, but I think hindsight and wisdom is to be able to see that, hold on a sec, there's also a silver lining to all of our difficulties. Otherwise, we wouldn't have them.
Mm. When someone is in their most difficult or in the, quote unquote, in the thick of it all, and they're really trying to see the light all the way out, and they have been here before, and they have been here before, but I feel like the pain then catapults all these past sort of pains, and then all these old wounds open up, and it's like you do feel somewhat like, far out, I'm here again. And sometimes, though, the same resources and tools that you've used in past healing might not necessarily work in your current state. Have you ever felt that way? Or like, what happens with your clients when the tools that they once used aren't helping them?
This is why I love NLP, because NLP is basically the study of success, of what works. Psychology studies what's wrong.
Mm.
Why are you the way you are? What happened in childhood? Freud is, cause and effect. Because of this, then this happens. And there is value to that. But NLP is the study of success. So if someone comes and they can't get through something, if they've used the same tools over and over again, which once helped them 5 years ago, but it's not helping them now, well, it's pretty bad thinking to use the same tool to try and get them out of a different scenario. So they need different thinking, different tools. They need to upgrade their system. The same with our iPhone, with our computers, with everything in life, you need upgrades. So I think part of the journey, if someone's going through a really difficult and deep time, the first thing is that, I see myself as a first responder on a scene. If someone goes through a car crash, there's the first responders. They make sure they're alive. They don't teach them the theories of life. They're there to
Yeah.
support them, to love them, to nurture them, to make sure that they're okay. Once they get to the hospital and they're okay, and the danger and the threat is gone, then they can start working through what tools do they need physio? Do they need a strength and conditioning coach? Do they need certain medications? Do they need protocols? Like, what is it after that? But I think in the moment, if someone's going through an incredibly difficult time, my number one responsibility is to see them, to hear them, to understand them. Because if they're coming to me, they don't have someone to give them that. Otherwise, it wouldn't come to me. They come to me for the tools to get out of it. But really, what they're coming for is to be truly seen, truly heard. And a lot of the time, when people go through a tough time in life, going through bad breakups, the friends and family mean well, but it doesn't mean that they've got the tools and understanding to help them through. Sometimes, they could throw out comments like, oh, just they weren't good for you. Get over it, like you're so much better off without them. Now, there is truth to that, but a lot of the time it doesn't help because in the moment there's this deep missing and longing and hurt and abandonment and rejection and the life's crumbling. And so I think that anyone going through a really difficult time, they need to find someone who sees them, who understands them, who just listens. Because in that safe relationship, a lot of repair happens. And once they see, you're going to have that deep breath shows that this is the somatic work. It's important to see how we respond. And you obviously responding to what I'm saying. Your body is telling me.
There was a deep unconscious sigh there, and you caught it.
What was
Which
it?
is always what Dean does.
What was it? What was that?
I think sometimes it is just speaking about the same almost story or processing. You're almost in a loop, but it in some weird twisted way, it helps as there's no resolution. What's done is done and what's happened has happened. But I do find that the people that I've really leaned in the most recent times is my support network, and their ability to be able to hold space so eloquently and making me feel safe again. And what you highlighted there is I am such a solution-focused type of person. Those that are listening and that know my brand is like, I'm very resilient, I'm very strong. I've got all these tools and da, 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 da. But yet when I'm in the thick of it all and I'm very hard on my sleeve, I don't necessarily think I need resources and tools to try and get over it right now. That's quite alienating because I'm
Definitely.
very good at that.
The beautiful thing about you is that you've surrounded yourself with people who get it, who can be that support for you. Most people don't have that, especially they come from, difficult childhoods and upbringings, and they just struggle to make those friends who are really like that. It's not easy, it's really not easy. That's a testament to you and your personality. And sometimes the solution can be the distraction, especially if we're so motivated and driven and we want to solve this now, 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 but that's avoiding a very delicate part of the human experience, which is feeling. You don't get over things, you feel through them. And I think if you give yourself space to feel, to process, to allow someone else to be there for you, to allow your friends to support you, to cry when you want to cry, to laugh when you go through that process and get some of the raw emotion out, you know the solution. You'll be able to I'm not worried about that part of it, right? It's giving yourself that space to be able to just process things for a bit and feel things.
And so I want to talk about love, which is such a deep, complex word at times, or maybe it is simple, but I wanted to talk about how is love enough in a relationship, right? And what are the other key elements, or if there are any, to what is deemed as a successful relationship or a fruitful relationship? Because I'm sitting here kind of being like, and I love so deeply. And when I love, I'm all in on love. And I'm recognizing that I just don't think that love is enough.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think love is ever enough. And I think it also depends on the definition that we give it. But people can be in love and not compatible. Like someone can love a business. They really love coaching, but their business is not successful. They never ever make it. They love it deeply. They love helping people. They love serving people, but they never make a successful business. Why? Well, if they could just love their business enough, it would work, but that's not the case. We have practical feedback to tell us that love is not enough. Are they willing to do what's required to make it work? That for me is the biggest question, because most people aren't willing to do what's required to make their business work. Same with relationships, especially when we talk about attachment theory. When we talk about the insecure attachments, a lot of the time they confuse love for an activated attachment system. They think they really love someone, but they're just in this unhealthy bond dynamic that recreates the unhealthy childhood dynamics that they had with their caregivers. And here they are, and they're loving and they're loving and they're loving and loving, but the relationship doesn't work because love's not enough. Relationships are difficult. Business is difficult. Life is difficult. And how willing are people to be uncomfortable, to do what's actually required to be in a healthy relationship? Because if you really, not you, but if someone really loves someone, like really, if I really love my partner, then I have to understand what she needs. And that may go against what I need. She may need to come close. I may need space. But if I really love her and I keep pushing for my space and not giving her anything of what she needs, then that creates an unhealthy dynamic. So I think it's a tricky one between, is it actually love? Is it an unhealthy relationship, just activated attachment systems where we delude ourselves into thinking it is love? And then I think the key to it all is, are we willing to do what's required to love the person? Are we willing to do what's required to love ourselves? Are we willing to do what's required to make the relationship work? And that's the hardest thing by far, because that's when you have to deal with your own insecurities, your own fears, your own traumas, all this sort of stuff that comes to the surface that just wants to be seen, loved, and have things our own way.
Is there a way that we can, if someone's sitting here listening to this episode right now, is there a way that we know whether it is love or whether it's that we've actually got more work to do or that we are masking it? Because I think it's it's so blurred. We often go, but I love them. I love him or her. And you're right. Like it's a few people have said, it's like, do I love him or do I love the idea of him? Or do I love him or do I love who I was when I was with him? Do I love him or do I love the creation of him? There's so many levels to, even I'm going through it and just trying to process and being like, okay, well, like, what is it that I love? Or do I have or am I staring back in the mirror and being like, okay, I've got work to do in this, right? And I mean, fair enough. It's, people listening to this and who might be following you and me would have, I would assume, some level of self-awareness. So I think I'm going to give a bit more credit to the audience listening, that they're reflective, they're aware, but yet we can also get quite confused within our own concepts of love.
It's so difficult. And especially if we haven't witnessed healthy love before, we don't know how to spot it. We don't know how to identify it. And then we find ourselves in unhealthy relationships thinking that this is love, but really it is some unhealthy dynamic that's causing chaos, pain, suffering to both sides. And I really think that's the hardest part about this journey of self-development, is to reteach ourselves and to dissect what is a healthy relationship. What does it look like? Do I feel anxious all the time? Am I confused in the dynamic, not knowing when the other person's going to be there or not? Like, is that love because I feel extreme highs and extreme lows? Or can love be more consistent, secure, predictable, where there is a conflict and you come together and you make things better? 1 and 1 equals 3, not 1 and 1, sweep it under the rug, let's just move on because we both love each other dearly. So I think the first thing is to really know thyself, to take a good hard look at ourselves. And we can't do that without a third person or a second person, if you're in a couple, third person, or a mentor or a support network, because you need someone to hold the mirror up and go, you're not seeing this. You don't understand that. Do you realize that when you have this behavior, it is because you're not feeling good enough, you feel inadequate, and you're not actually expressing what's going on for you. You're acting out. And so without the other person to reflect back to us what's going on, we won't know if we're in an unhealthy dynamic, if we're actually in love, if we're not in love. You know, I think that most people are in love, but their definition of love can be a painful situation. So to summarize, it's about taking time to really look at, how do you feel in a relationship? How is that relationship? Be brutally honest, because a lot of the time we don't want to be brutally honest about the situation. We blind ourselves to the reality of what's going on just because we want to have that feeling of not being lonely, of being looked after, of being with someone. And that's a dangerous position to be in, because all that happens is that we just push things down, we push it down, something comes up, we push it away, we distract, we ignore, we don't repair, but it doesn't disappear. It just bubbles under the surface. And eventually, this enormous, monumental outburst happens and it creates big dramas in the relationship. So I think we have to redefine our definition of what a loving relationship is. When we have a definition, then we know if this is good or not. If our definition of success in business is to earn $100,000 a month, and we know that that is a healthy business for us, then we'll know if we hit it or not. But we don't think about these things when it comes to relationships.
Mm. Talk to us about and remind us all about what the attachment styles are. Because I know that we might have like our default, and it's always about moving towards or like trying to become a secure attached. How difficult is it to then move into a different attachment style, or are we just innately, this is who we are?
I think that we all come into the world securely attached. And then something happens in childhood when we're a baby with our caregivers, because we are reliant on our caregivers for survival. So if we're not getting responded to, if we're not getting our needs met, if we're not getting fed, then we kind of have to change and adapt to keep ourselves safe, because we can't communicate, we can't talk things through, we can't put boundaries in place and leave, we can't even walk, right? So we start creating all these behavioral adaptations from when we're a baby based on the relationship we have with our caregivers. And this starts developing our blueprint for relationships. If we have a healthy and secure caregiver or caregivers, and they, most of the time, more often than not, they meet our emotional needs. They sit with us when we're crying. They don't lock us in the room and make us cry ourselves to sleep. They're there for us. They have that emotional support. Then we start believing that relationships are great. You know, I can rely on the people around us. That creates a secure attachment. That child becomes securely attached. They become optimistic in relationships because relationships are great. They're a source of love, care, empathy, understanding, so they can go out in the world and take more risks. Don't have to change themselves. They're more authentic. They can stand in integrity with what they want, what they need. They're willing to walk away from relationships, even though it's painful for them, because they've built that secure base to springboard off. So that's the first one, the secure attacher. We all came from that place, and we can all go back to that place. The other three are anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. So anxious is essentially when our caregivers, when the responses are inconsistent. Sometimes they met our needs, sometimes they didn't. And so the child starts feeling, is it going to happen again? Is it not going to happen again? What do I have to do to get my needs met? Should I be sick? If I'm sick, then they're around me. Then my needs all of a sudden, okay, I need to get sick often so I get my needs met, because that's the way that I feel safe in relationships. So the anxious attacher is more uncertain in relationships. They're not sure if their partner's going to stay or go. And that creates a lot of anxiety. Then the other one is avoidant. The avoidant attached child comes into the world and they were continuously neglected. They cried, they reached out for help and support. No one was there. They did it again. No one was there. This kept happening. And so they just put their walls up, pushed everyone away because it was too risky to lean on people. It's too risky to rely on relationships. And so that develops the avoidant attacher. And the last one is disorganized. Disorganized is a tricky one because usually it's someone who comes from some pretty serious trauma, and they're high on the anxious attachment, they're high on the avoidant, but they're not just swinging between the two. Relationships are very confusing for them because a lot of the time in childhood, the person who was supposed to provide safety for them were also providing trauma, abuse, all those things. So they become conflicted and confused. They don't want to get too far away because they rely on their caregivers, and they don't want to get too close because they're going to get hurt. So in relationships, they're called disorganized, they're unpredictable, it's uncertain. And it's a bit more difficult to navigate someone who's got a disorganized attachment. And to answer your first question, we can all become more securely attached. I think the illusion is that we have to become secure. It's too much pressure. What does that even mean? But for me, it's about behaviors. Am I exhibiting a secure behavior in this moment, or am I exhibiting an insecure behavior? Am I pushing someone away because I don't want to tell them how I really feel? Am I walking around on eggshells, trying not to hurt the other person and suppressing how I feel? because those are two insecure behaviors. Or am I sitting with it, expressing how I feel in a very gentle, kind, loving, and direct way? That's more secure. So I think in the moments, we've got to look for the moments of security, not as a whole.
Can someone present themselves as secure or attached, but really be one of the other three?
Yeah.
I think in adult relationships and just going off my own lived experience and stuff, like the most recent relationship, I actually felt very safe and secure. That was what was very different. It wasn't toxic. There wasn't any outbursts. There wasn't, inability to communicate. There was always kind of, this is where I get really stuck, because it actually offered me safety and peace and security, because everything seemed to be the secure attached, and I was moving through. I was I'm anxious avoidant. But like I was very aware that I was actually becoming for myself secure attached through this relationship. And I feel even now I'm a lot more secure attached, and knowing my boundaries and knowing my values and all of that. But it's just interesting to sort of see this particular relationship unfold, because then he mustn't be all that securely attached, because there were other things that catapulted this relationship to where it's at now.
Yeah. I think people can definitely come across as securely attached, especially the avoidant attacher, because they are so good and they have learned that it's too risky to say what they think, to say how they feel, to lean on another person, to get too close. Vulnerability is too scary for them because they continuously got let down. So the avoidant attacher has become a master of coming across as everything is good. And in the early phases of a relationship, especially, they can come on strong. They can say all the right things. They really want to be in a relationship. They want to give you the world. They feel the chemistry and the connection. But when they get squeezed, because at the start, they're not squeezed. They're swimming in the shallow end. Life is easy for them. There's no real risk. But when things start getting squeezed for them, when there's conflict, when they have to comfort their partner, how do they react? Because you have to look at attachment theory from someone's attachment style from multiple angles. And I reckon if you really had a good hard look at the difficult times together, it's not in the when everything is good, because everyone's good when everything is good. But when things are really tough, when there is big conflict, when you really were vulnerable and needed support in like certain moments, what was the response? Was it more shut down, standoffish, deflecting, getting space, not really dealing with things properly? When he had things coming up for him, big things in his life, was he very expressive, like really letting you into his inner sanctum of what's going on? Could he tap into that vulnerability, or was everything put to the side, swept under the rug, continue, hit the gym, go with the boys, do all these things to kind of distract what's going on? So yes, people can come across as secure all the time, but I think the thing that helped me the most is to really identify what's happening in the big moments. How are they responding and how am I responding in the meaningful moments? Because that's really when our attachment systems get activated or deactivated.
Yeah. And as relationships end, I think there's such a natural thing to kind of go back to a familiarity, or you hear a lot of people trying again or going back to their ex. And is there ever a time where it is healthy to go and revisit your past relationships, or you have to move on and go no contact? And this is something that's constantly debated about, because I think you go, well, love is hard work, love is work, love is this. So it's like, you got to work on it. But then when is there a point where it's just like, actually, like you have to walk away? And I think that's so complex.
It's very complex. And the problem with relationship advice is it's not black and white. And if anyone gives black and white answers, it makes it very difficult to trust them, because do you go back to an ex? It depends. It depends on many things. And for me as a coach, it's in my best interest to help the client see what's in their best interest. So I'm just the reflector. I'm the mirror to shine back to them and say, okay, what do you really want? You want a healthy relationship? Okay, let's look at that old relationship. What was unhealthy about it? Okay, this. Fine. Do you want to go back there? Yeah, I really miss them. Okay, what do you need to see that's different this time if you go back? And how can you know if it's actually changed and healthy for you? If they go through that process, fine, they can go back. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. Don't go back, go no contact. For me, in the no contact story is that a lot of the time anxious attachers will come to me and they can't move on. They get stuck in this, missing them, longing for them, confused from the breakup because there wasn't any certainty, there wasn't clarity or closure, and they get stuck. And so they kind of reach out every now and then, but their partner or their ex needs space. Like the more you reach out, the more you're going to push them away because you're not giving them the one thing that they need. And so in those moments, if they want the best chance of getting them back, maybe it's a good idea to go no contact in that moment. And then we can figure out for how long, right? So there's no hard and fast rules. It's essentially about understanding what the person wants, what they identify as good for them, and then guiding them there. I've had people, I can't tell you how many coaching calls I have. People have gone no contact for 12 months, 18 months, like a long time. And they come to me, they've been in therapy for years, and they go, Dean, I just can't get over this person. I go, okay, so what's been going on? Well, they left. We had an amazing weekend in Spain together, and all of a sudden they wanted to meet my family, gone, ghosted, finished, and they won't give me any closure. I'm like, okay, that's a very difficult thing to go through. But they go, now it's been 12 months and there's been no contact, and I still can't get over the situation. I go, well, the strategy of no contact is not working anymore. We need a different strategy. This goes back to NLP. What is, studying what is a successful life for them? What's a successful relationship? We need different thinking now. So I'm like, what do you want? Like, well, I kind of want to move on, or I want to be with them. I'm like, well, you can't be stuck in this no man's land then. So what needs to happen in order for that to happen? And a lot of the time they have to reach out again. And so I will support them in cultivating and creating a message to reach out to that ex after 12 months, because two things are going to happen. Either the ex is going to be like, oh my God, it's so good to hear from you. Let's go for coffee. We'll go back to Spain, which is unlikely, but it's possible. And then they get what they want. They get back in the relationship, or they get no response, which is rough, or they get a bad response, which is as rough, maybe even more rough. But that gives them closure. Because in my mind, I'm like, this person needs closure. They can't move forward. The only way they can get closure is to change the strategy. The strategy is we need to reach out to them because they've done the somatics, they've done the sound healing, they've done the yoga, the cold plunges. They've got 15 therapists. They're now doing EMDR. Nothing's working. Okay, I need a result now. 60 minutes. What are we going to do? Reach out to them. They reach out to them. They get a bad response. Boom. The hope's gone. It's gone. They can move on. Is it a difficult pill to swallow? 100%. It's brutal. But they're not going to spend another 12 months in the, is he going to come back? Is he not going to come back? Should I reach out? Should I not reach out? No contact. I have to block all the apps so I don't look. That's a terrible place to be in, It's terrible. The key is to figure out what the person needs, what they actually want, and then support them to making that decision. There's no black and white rules.
Yeah, I also think like when we say no contact, it might be no contact to blocking the apps and no communication, but yet is there still contact and emotional tie, right? So are you saying no contact, but you're still creating a fake Instagram profile, or you're getting their friends to suss out if, you're checking in, you're asking random questions to still keep them there connected. And I think that's something that a lot of women and men need to be aware of when you're doing no contact, but you're not emotionally healing because you're not emotionally moving anywhere. You might be masking it with all the distractions, but yet only when you're lying in bed and scrolling, whether you're still looking at their profile, which for me is still like, that's contact.
100%, 100%. And I also think as well, like you cannot move on if you're still holding on to something. I did a story about this during the week, and it sounds crazy, but if you really think about it, how can you move on if you're holding on to a thread of hope that things are going to be different, that things are going to change? Hope is a double-edged sword. It can get you through the hardest times ever, deep, dark holes. You're like, well, there's hope. But it can keep you stuck in a deep, dark hole as well, because they're thinking, well, this person can come back. I'm just going to hold on for another 3 years, right? And your whole life is on hold. The no contact rule it's iffy, but I like it as a tool. If someone is really struggling at the start of a breakup and they're like compelled to reach out, even though the other person was crystal clear, no contact is a beautiful tool because it helps them just create a little bit of separation. And even if they land up reaching out, whatever, it still gives them that space to kind of create some energetic space between the two so they're not so entangled. And it gives them a good the best chance of the other person, if the other person has space to calm down, regulate their nervous system, maybe they come back. But if they keep prodding and poking and messaging and sending carrier pigeons to deliver messages all the time, they're just going to chase the other person to the other side of the world. And so no contact for me, coming from like an NLP background, is used as a tool. When is it beneficial? When is it not beneficial? If it's used at the wrong time, like 2 years after a breakup, that can be a very difficult thing because that person's not going to be able to move on.
Mm. How important is the relationship with self? And as you go into a relationship and you start integrating with that other person, how important is it to keep the relationship with yourself? I think, again, you kind of build this identity, which is what it is, right? If you're going to build something with someone, you're building life together. Your identity very much becomes amalgamated. But yeah, and then that's where I feel when people break up, they lose so much of who they are because they don't really know who they are anymore. How do you balance that?
It's easy to know who you are when there's no difficulties in life. It's easy to think you know who you are when everything's all good. But one of my favorite quotes is that without contradictory impression, there is nothing to awaken reflection. And when we get into a relationship, we need that contradictory impressions from the other side to reflect back to us, oh, what's going on? Like, what are these patterns that I'm running that I'm unaware of? And so relationships, you're right, you move from an I to a we. Your whole identity changes. That can be a difficult thing, especially for people who are used to being so enmeshed in the other person's world. It's difficult, but that relationship will mirror back to us things that we need to do, because every time we get into an unhealthy dynamic, we're not happy because we lose ourselves. And that reminds us back, hold on a sec, maybe I need some boundaries. Maybe I need, someone reached out to me yesterday, and one of my old clients is actually a good friend now. And he's been spending a lot of time with his partner. And he messaged me, and they've been together a while now. And he's like, I don't know what's going on. I feel like I don't feel myself anymore. I'm picking fights in the relationship, all this sort of stuff. I'm like, mate, how beautiful is that? And I wish you would have come to me 3 weeks ago before you let it get to this point. But that relationship brought to his awareness that he allows himself to be too open in these relationships, to give too much, to be too available at the expense of the self. So because of that interaction, he now realizes, hold on a sec, he's been sacrificing himself, what's right for him, in order to please the other and make sure the relationship is good. But she's miserable as well, right? So the best thing you can do for your partner is actually look after yourself. Because if you sacrifice what's right for you and kind of get lost in this world of a relationship, they're going to be miserable as well, because you're going to create resentment. You're going to be pissed off at them. You're not going to be happy about the situation. You're going to be doing things you don't want to do to try and please them. And that's not a fun situation to be in. So it's so important to always take time to think about what's important to me. How am I showing up? What do I need to do for myself today? It's very easy to get lost, especially if we come from unhealthy dynamics in childhood, to get lost in a relationship that we put ourselves on the side, put them on the pedestal, then get pissed off, angry, and resentful the whole time. So it's important that you're a team, you're in it together. And one of the biggest keys to this whole thing, to looking after the self, is to actually involve your partner. It's to involve your partner. You're a team. You need them on board. Remember I said about secure attachment. A kid who has developed a secure attachment feels better to go in the world and take risks. They're more independent. It's a bit crazy to think that the more codependent, or the more you can rely on another person, the more you'll feel like yourself to go out in the world and take risks. And so one of the things that I notice all the time is that people don't let their partner in to say, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed at the moment. I feel like I've been neglecting myself. I feel like I put myself on the side, put you on a pedestal, and I really want to be there for you, but can we be there for me too? Is it okay for you to also hold me accountable to make sure that I take my space and go to gym and go to therapy and do what I have to do? Because when you're together, you start creating a healthy, that's secure attachment. And if they respond and go, you know what, Mel, that's freaking amazing. I'm here for you. You got this. Let's give me your calendar. We're booking some self-love days together. You now create a secure attachment together. I get goosebumps talking about it, but that's literally what most people miss out. They leave their partner on the side. It's about the self. And we look at, no, involve them. That's what a healthy relationship is, no?
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes that's always really resonated with me was like, for two halves to be a whole, each half has to be whole.
Mhm.
And I've just loved doing that work and making sure that, yeah, I think you should never lose yourself in a relationship. Talk to me about pedestaling. So I think a lot of people do this where they put their partners on a pedestal where it's like, they're so great, they're so amazing, look at all of this stuff. And I do recognize that it comes from a place of potentially like lack of self-worth within yourself, when you're like, oh
Mhm.
my God, they're amazing, they're the bee's knees. Basically, if this relationship ends, I'm nothing because they're so good. And then we often, self-fulfilling prophecy, you see them doing so well, or you see them blah, 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 and it reinforces that you were never good enough. So let's dive into that a
Well
little.
said. The problem with putting people on pedestals, it comes from a deep feeling of inadequacy or insecurity. If you think about it, if you put someone on a pedestal, you're looking up to them. But as a consequence, you feel like they're looking down to you because you're not good enough. That's why they're on the pedestal. And it creates this unhealthy dynamic. If you think you're the underdog in the relationship, you're going to create them as the overdog. Your relationships like to find balance. And this is what I see in attachment theory a lot. If someone is very anxious and comes into a relationship with someone who's more secure, and they're like messaging all the time, I need you, like they just don't give them space, the relationship tries to find balance. And the secure person will go, like try and just hold them off a little bit so they can take a breath and push them back. So the anxious creates the other side to some degree. If someone comes into a relationship and they're highly avoidant, one second they tell you they love you, want to meet the family, then they don't message you for 3 days. Even a secure person will be like, well, hold on a sec, where do I stand? Like, this is all over. I'm starting to feel anxious and worried and all these sort of things. So when it comes to the pedestal story, we have to be careful of how we view a relationship in a person. If we're so desperate to be in a relationship and we really think this person is amazing, we put them up, we're putting ourselves down on the floor. Talk about self-love and looking after the self in the relationship. You're stampeding all over yourself, right? You literally beating yourself up. One of the tools I give to, I'm running a mastermind now, and one of the tools I give them, especially people who are more anxious, it's the spotlight analogy. When we get into a relationship or even in dating, we feel, especially if we feel insecure, that this spotlight's on us. And it's like blinding. We're like, does he like me? Does she like me? Am I good enough? Am I good looking? Am I tall enough, short enough, wide enough, thin enough, smart enough? Like, am I enough? Right? Like, is he going to leave me? What does he really think about me? And there's a big spotlight on us. And when we ask those questions and we feel the spotlight, we freak out and we start acting in weird behaviors to compensate for this feeling of insecurity. But if we take that spotlight and we swing it the other way, all of a sudden you ask yourself, it takes them off the pedestal because you ask them, well, are they good enough for me? What do I like about them? What do I not like about them? What question marks do I have about this situation and the dynamic? And it gives them space to take the person off the pedestal and realize that no human's perfect. Everyone's got issues, no matter how amazing you think they are. In fact, the more amazing you think they are, the more questionable the situation is.
Yeah. 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 When someone's gone through a breakup, is there a time, you're probably going to say it depends, but how do you know that you're ready to start dating again or start exploring again? Is there a moment that someone should take the space to heal and to build up that self-worth and self-love? Or because again, I think so many people just go, all right, cool, on to the next. They go back into the dating pool, but they haven't actually worked on anything.
Yeah, and this goes back, and firstly, you know me too well because it's true. It does depend. It depends on the situation. I was coaching someone who was in a relationship for 10 years and they were checked out for 5 of them. So they were done. They just strung it along because of the children and whatnot. Are they ready to date straight away? Probably.
Mm.
Probably. They were already going to the therapy and dealing with all the stuff. So they're at a different stage of a relationship.
Yeah.
I think it really depends. It always comes back to self-awareness. If we don't look at our role in the situation, most people go to a mirror, they look in front of the mirror and they see that the face reflecting back to them on the mirror has got some mud on the cheek. And so they spend all day cleaning the mirror, not realizing that the mud's not moving because the mud's on their cheek. If they only cleared their cheek, the mud in the mirror would disappear.
Yeah.
And that analogy summarizes when it's ready to move on. Because if we think the mud's on their cheek, And that's not taking responsibility for their faults and their terrible, unhealthy behavior. But what is my role in this dynamic? And when we understand that, and when we allow ourselves to process the loss, the grief, the insecurity, all these things, then we give ourselves a chance of not bleeding on the next person and the next person as a distraction to not sitting in the discomfort. I think part of the problem with society these days is everyone avoids sitting in discomfort and just sitting with themselves and just going, hey, what's going on here? We're always running and rushing to the next person, to the next relationship, to the next business, to the next. But if we don't take the time, however long that is, maybe it's a month, maybe it's 6 months, there's no real hard and fast rule. But if we don't take the time to look at our own role in our own suffering, everything will just continue over and over again. And we always, in psychotherapy, there's this term magical thinking. We think that with a new person, it'll be different. Life will be different. Of course, it's going to be easier. If they lived in Perth and I lived in long distance, it's going to be much better. I won't have to see them all the time. If this, if that, if they're taller, if they're shorter, if they weren't so good looking, then all the guys wouldn't look at them when I'm walking down the street. That would make my life so much easier. If magical thinking, because it's an illusion. We know as human beings, whenever we get the one thing that we so desperately think is going to change our life, nothing really changes. It just makes us feel a little bit. And then we go into the next one straight away. So this magical thinking that we think everything's going to be different on the other side. But the truth is, wherever you go, there you are. You take yourself with you. And so if you don't take the time to look at what's going on from your side, to look at your own role in all the relationships that you're having. Quick story. I went on I was single for many, many years, and I went on a lot of dates, and I was like, okay, well, I can't go for the lawyers. I got to go for the teachers because the teachers are, more kind. And then I changed the profession, and then I changed the height, and then I changed the hair color. Then I'm like, okay, well, it's the Australians. I got to change the nationality. Maybe the Spanish or the Norwegians, or they'll be better, right? And the same thing kept happening over and over again, where either I would let someone down, which was incredibly painful for me, or I would get very hurt along the journey. And I went on this date. It was one date, and it was the greatest date in the history of dates. Like, it was next level. We connected, we went high, we went low, there was chemistry, there was connection, we were talking about our childhoods. Like, it was insane. First date. And afterwards, I was in the taxi on the way home, and I just had this feeling, like this anxious feeling, that it was too good to be true. She messaged me. She said, amazing date. Thank you so much. Da, da, da. Next day, gone, ghosted, never heard from her again, right? That moment brought me to my knees. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. So I'm sitting at home, I'm talking to my friend, and I'm like, mate, what is wrong with me? I don't get it. I feel like I've got some stuff to offer to someone, but yet I'm still in these situations where I'm always getting hurt, even if I hurt the other person, it's also hurting me, because it just reminds me that I'm not good enough to even hold a space for another person and be a good partner. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? And he gives me this business card. He goes, go see this guy. And I go, what is it? He goes, he's a psychotherapist, but he's much more than that. I go, no, I don't know, mate, but I'm down in the dumps here. And I'm thinking, there must be something seriously wrong with me, because one date has affected me so deeply. I go see this guy. I'm sitting in his office, this tiny little office in Melbourne, and he's sitting like 2 meters away from me, staring in my eyes. He could see straight into my soul, and he goes, why are you here? I said, I don't know. Like, I keep getting into these relationships that are painful. I don't know what's going on with me. There's something seriously wrong with me. So he goes, let's just dissect some of your past relationships and all these dates that you go on and start explaining them to me. So I start telling him, I like really independent women. They don't rely on me too much, going through this whole story. And he goes, so you like avoidant attachers. The more avoidant, the better. And something inside me knew that there was a truth to that. I never heard that word before, but I knew that something was right. I went home, read the book Attached, which was my introduction to attachment theory. Everything made sense. And that's kind of how I got into the scene, is that understanding, hold on a sec. It's not that there's something wrong with me here or that I'm broken, but I've developed these incredibly unhealthy patterns from childhood, from primary school, from my whole history. And I keep repeating them, thinking that I just need to change what the other person looks like or does as a job or where they live, and that's going to change everything. But I realized that I am at the front and center of my relationships. And that is a very empowering thing, because if we think that it's always the other person, we can't change that. We lose control. They just have to walk past our house and we have a panic attack. But that was empowering. And that's what I like bringing to people. Like, yes, it's injustice if someone treated you horrifically. I'm sorry you went through that. Just remember, you have control. You are the one, the captain of your ship. When we understand that and we look at your role in this situation after you've, gone through the breakup, whatever, then you're in a more empowered position and you are ready to go out there and find people who are more compatible with what you really want.
How did you take back that control? Like, do you physically remember like a turning point for you where you're like, I'm going to do differently. I'm going to consciously, and I love conscious human beings, but I'm going to consciously date different or attract different. And a follow-up question on that, just so it doesn't slip my mind, is like, how important is environment to attracting a more like aligned frequency person? And you physically moved, environments. And I've just recently physically moved houses into a brand new suburb. How important is that environmental change?
It's incredibly important. One of my mentors tells me all the time, he goes, Dean, a seed has everything it needs within itself to become a tree. It has everything. It just needs the right environment. If you take that seed and you throw it into the ocean, it's going to die. All the magic, all the power, all the ability to grow into a tree, provide shade and fruit for everyone goes because it's in the wrong environment. And the science in the north of the equator is different to the science in the south of the equator. So it's a different environment. You need different things in order to flourish, right? Kind of same principle here. Environments matter. And yes, it's easy to think that, oh, we should be in control of our state in no matter what environment. Like none of us are really monks, and even monks, they struggle with this sort of stuff. Environment matters. When you feel better, when you feel at ease, when you feel some sort of peace, home is so important to me. I need to feel like I'm at home. It's my stability. It's my anchor in life. Like the secure attachment as a child. When I feel safe at home, secure at home, then I will go out and take more risks in the world. Because my environment is stable. And I see so many people are in like really rough environments, and a lot of the time they can't do anything about it. But you can always change who you hang around with, and you can find people, which is also an environment, to support you on this journey. So environments everywhere, everything. And if you start feeling better internally, you'll start attracting and seeing things differently. When I was in my place in Sydney, I wasn't happy. I was miserable. I'm pretty sure I had mold poisoning. Like it was just an absolute mess for 8 months. And that whole time was so difficult for me. I felt down in the dumps. I couldn't get it going. I had to motivate myself to get out of the house and do all these things. But I understood what was going on. So I was gentle with myself. But the moment I changed my environment, everything changed. I started launching these programs. I do these risks, all these things that I was putting on the side. I'm doing them all out of my comfort zone because I feel supported and safe in this environment, which sounds crazy because it's just an apartment, but it's not just an apartment. It's how you feel, it's not just a house, it's a home. So that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question was what?
How did, like, do you know
the moment.
your turning point? Yeah, was it like a aha moment, or is it just day by day? One day you just wake up and it doesn't hurt as bad. You've changed. And
This guy who I was telling you about when I was sitting in his office and we were dissecting my relationships, he said to me one thing, because I actually used to fight with him a lot because I push back. I don't take on anything that anyone says to me. And I fired him once, maybe even twice. And then eventually I came back because I realized that was just my ego getting in the way. And I was actually too scared to look at where I was going to go there. But he said one thing to me when I came back. He goes, Dean, if you keep making these decisions, these courageous decisions over and over again, in 6 months, you'll look back, you won't recognize yourself. And I thought to myself, that's an interesting thing to say. And I didn't really think too much of it. 6 months later, I looked back and I'm like, I cannot believe what an anxious mess I was back then. It doesn't even feel like it was me. That person doesn't live, he doesn't live here anymore. He's gone, weird. And so to answer your question, it's the moments. You said the word conscious. Conscious means that you're aware of your thoughts, your behaviors, your feelings, your patterns. What are these things? And when you're conscious of it, then you need the courage to do something about it. So 3 stages to transformation that I've carried with me forever is You need to be aware. You have to be aware of what's going on. You cannot change that which you're unaware of. Shine a light on everything you can't see. Number two, in the moment of awareness, you have to change your behavior. Choose a new outcome. Choose a new pattern. Because most people, they get stuck on level one. They become aware of their patterns. They don't have the courage to change them. And then they just beat themselves up for doing the same thing that's keeping them stuck. And they know they're doing it, which is, it's even worse. So ignorance is better in that
Yeah.
section.
Yeah.
And then courage to change your behavior. And then you have to reflect. What happened? What changed? How did you feel when you stood up for yourself? What happened when you put a boundary to the people around you? Do they support you? Do they love you? Did they nurture you? Did you die? No, it was okay. Life continues, but you're happier. And so those are the three stages. And for me, there was a moment which solidified everything. After understanding attachment theory, doing a lot of the work on myself, I've been working on myself for 15 years. I went on a date with someone after that terrible, or amazingly, incredibly terrible experience. I went on a date with someone who I've been wanting to go on a date with for a long time, but she was a little bit inconsistent all over the place. And sitting on a date, and I was feeling uneasy because I was noticing how I feel. I'm not focusing on them. I need to notice what's happening for me. I'm already feeling a little bit uneasy, but I'm excited to be there. And she asked me a question and she goes, "What are you looking for?" Now, the old Dean would have run an unhealthy pattern and would have said, "Unsure, because I don't want to put pressure on them, so they run away." But that's not being authentic to myself. I would say, "I'm not sure yet, just seeing what's out there, la la la, open to what comes," right? Some wishy-washy ridiculousness. But in that moment, I was aware of it. I took a moment and I said, "I'm looking for a relationship." And she's like, "Oh, that's great." I'm like, "Phew, that was great, you know, that was a big step." Moment of awareness, changed my behavior, did something different, reflected. She responded well. I'm like, "That's awesome." I said, "What about you?" And she said these words in almost a condescending tone. She goes, "I'm looking for the one, and when I meet him, I would know, or if he was here, I would know about it." Essentially telling me that I'm the person, right?
Not good. Yeah.
And this was a major transformation for me, because in that moment, half of me, the old me, was like, "She doesn't like me. I need to up my ante here. I need to step up. I need to work harder. I need to convince her that I am the person that she needs to be with." I was on a date for 45 minutes, right? And there's a half of me, the insecure part of me, that I need to be seen here. I need to be loved. I can't let her leave. I really work. I'll do anything that's required. And then the other half of me was like, hold on a sec. You've been here before. You know how these ends with me in pain. Moment of awareness is do something differently. And what I did was just take a breath and say, "That's a question mark." And I just put it over there and I left it. I didn't buy into it. I didn't try and over deliver. I didn't try and outwork myself. I just put a question mark there. It happened multiple times throughout the night. And these question marks kept coming up. But deep down, the other half of me, the old, insecure, like the part of me that just wants to be loved and held, was like, I've got to show her this is the one. Like, this is the one. And the other half was like, "No, Dean, maybe let's try something new, because you know how this is going to end." And that was the turning point for me, because when I turned that one down, which was one of the hardest things I had to do, all of a sudden there was like another one that was also turned down, but it opened the gates for
Wow.
people who were more compatible with me and what I really wanted. You know, you started attracting a different sort of people. Also, because I could see them now. Couldn't see them before. I was blind.
Yeah, that is so powerful, because like as you shared that story, I think it reminded me of my another ex that I was dating, and I am very forthcoming. I'm at the age where it's so open, it's so evident that want to be a mom, want to be married. Like there's certain things where I just won't settle. So I've always gone into my very first dates being like, "Do you want marriage? And do you want kids?" And but it's because I don't want to waste time. And these are some non-negotiables of where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I remember one day, and it was going so well. It was beautiful. European man, was like, just so like attraction was all there. And then I had said, I'm like, "Oh, well, I've already discounted you as anything long-term, because you've already expressed that you've just come out of a separation, you don't want to remarry, and you don't want kids." And the first thing that he said, like, he paused, silent, and I feel like it's this insecurity where he goes, "Well, don't discount me." But it wasn't because I'm now suddenly the one. I actually feel like, as you've shared your story, it was more just, well, let me show you that I am the one for you. And that just ended up being quite a toxic relationship that did end. But I think it's from those things where we do chase on both ends, going, let me prove to you that I am going to be the one for you, or that we are the right one. It's
Yeah,
very
exactly,
powerful.
exactly. But we need to be able to see it. Most people can't see it because they don't take the time to
Mm,
actually, it's not even about the time. You really need another person to talk about things through, like talk about these things, like to hire you as a coach or me as a coach, because we just hold the mirror up. Like I don't tell anyone to do anything,
mm,
but I show them, hold on a sec, I've noticed this pattern that you're running. And when they can see the pattern, they can change it. If they can't see it, they can't change it. And that was the thing for me. Once I started dating again, I could see so many of these insane patterns. One of them, short-term relationships. If I wanted a real relationship, I got to stop trying and going for people who could only give me a short-term relationship. Sounds crazy, but it's true. If someone was in Australia for a month, I can trick myself into thinking it's going to be something serious, but the reality it's not.
yeah.
That's differentiating between the insecure part of myself and the secure part, and choosing healthier behaviors and decisions in the moment. And you've got to do them consistently. It's like
Mm,
business, money, everything takes time. You want to get a six pack, you can't go to gym once. You got to go over and over again. When you do it, you start getting muscle memory and it just changes, you know. Like if I stop going to gym for 6 months now, it's okay. When I start again, it'll happen quickly because I built that muscle memory. Same with this stuff.
mm. Talk to me about language. So in our last episode, you really mentioned that language is the key to the soul, and very conscious of, like, being very conscious of the language that we use. And I
Mhm.
think as I've grown older and I'm in my mid-30s, not that I ever thought I would be here. And I'm like, I do catch myself being like, oh my God, the pool is going to be so small out there, because, like, and then you're like, I have to snap myself out of it, right?
Mm.
Because it's like, well, if I say that out loud, what's going to happen, Mel? What's going to freaking happen? Like, you're going to
Yeah.
go, the pool's really small. There's no good quality men out there, blah, 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 blah. But how can people use some simple tools to just catch themselves on the language?
Language is everything. And ironically, it's pretty good to have a small pool. You don't want a big pool. You want a small pool because if you've got a big pool, then you're going to catch everything. You don't want to catch everything. You want to catch the little ones. So even in the language, maybe it is a good thing to have a small pool, right?
Hmm.
Language is everything. In this mastermind, we spoke about beliefs last week. When someone goes through a difficult time in life, their brain wants to generalize what happened and protect themselves from happening again. So they start developing these limiting beliefs and these limitations, like, I'm never going to find anyone again. Like, this was the end of it. I'm too old. That's a limit. Are you too old, or are you just getting started? It's so many different things, but noticing the language that we use, and you just had a good one there, such a good example. When you notice the language, you can change it. And you need to realize that it's just a belief. What is it? It's nothing. It's just words. Abracadabra. As I say, so I create. That's essentially what it means. And our words have power. Someone said to me last week, I'm going to be single forever. I'm never going to find someone. And I go,
Yeah.
that is even, imagine for a second that wasn't true. She's never going to find someone because she has created a limiting belief based on a very painful experience she's had in her life. She had a
Mhm.
terrible breakup. All of a sudden, she's never going to find anyone. That sentence protects her from getting hurt again. Because if
Mhm.
she's never going to find anyone again, the most perfect man can be standing in front of her, and all her mind can see is, I'm never going to find anyone again. He can be compatible, loving, healthy, good looking, likes her for her, kind, and really wants to make it work. And all she can see is, I'm never going to find anyone. Never going to find anyone. It's like going to the shopping mall. I think I may have even used this metaphor last time, but so many people go to the shopping mall and say, it's Saturday, there's going to be no car parks. There's not going to be a car park. How can there be? It's Saturday. There's going to be no car park. And they just drive past all these car parks. They can't even see it. They create a scotoma, a blind spot in their brain, where their brain is like, I cannot see that car park, even though it's in front of me, even though it's in front of me. So it's important to listen to the words that we use to describe events. Most of the time, it's not true. It's absolute nonsense and it's absolute bullshit. And when you notice that sentence and notice that belief and notice the words used to describe an event, then you can flip it. You can ask, is it really true? What is the truth? The truth is that there's more people on Earth, based on your thing, there's more people on Earth than there ever was, but there's almost 8 billion people. So the pool's actually widened. The people you're looking for has got smaller, but that's a very good thing because you don't want to be catching the trout, the salmon, all the tadpoles. You just want the one thing that you like, right?
Love that. Yeah, that's really,
And
really powerful.
yeah. And so that's one thing, again, like I know I keep harping on it, but you can't do this yourself. You need someone to go to you, hold on a sec. Someone comes in. I had a client come to me 8 months ago, and she comes with a laundry list of diagnoses. Like so many people come to me with the same thing. They've been in therapy, trauma therapy for 10 years and everything. And I'm not a therapist, right? I just notice patterns. I give them back to the person. They can do with them what they want. But once they can see it, it's much easier to break it because they almost laugh about it. So this woman comes to me with this laundry list of diagnoses: ADHD, general anxiety disorder, like bipolar, like just, and I'm
Everything.
looking. So she comes to me and she's telling me this story that the reason her relationship is stuffed is because of all these things. And in that moment, yes, there is an element of truth to it, but she is using that language to elicit a response from me so she can feel better about her situation for not doing what she actually wants to do. I won't buy into it. So I'm like, bullshit.
Yep.
You can't convince me what you've been convincing everyone else about. And she was like, huh? I go, this story that you keep telling, you've said it so many times and it's not going to fly here. And I mean that in the most loving way. You're so much more than that story. And you think that this relationship is about this laundry list of bullshit. I won't buy it. And in that moment, there was like this massive release, this like epiphany, because she could put all this shit to the side and she could actually realize that, hold on a sec, she was just terrified to say what she felt because she was abandoned as a child. And that's okay. It's okay to be there. But we create these stories that we tell everyone over and over again, which has no meaning to it anymore because we said it so many times, no vulnerability, no emotion, because it keeps us safe. That limiting belief, that the words that we use to explain something either protects us and keeps us stuck or it frees us. So are there no amazing men in the world? Your brain there's no amazing men in the world. Your brain shuts off and doesn't even look. There's nothing to look for. Or how can I find an amazing man? Now your brain goes into, okay, what do I need to look for? How can I acknowledge it? What do I need to change within myself to be that person that's going to attract an amazing man? How we describe events, how we challenge them, these limiting beliefs, if we buy into them or not, will change everything. And this woman's life changed, not because of me, because I'm so special, but because I showed her a pattern that she's been running for so many years that is protecting her from expressing vulnerability because she didn't want to be let down. The moment she saw it, she had the courage to change everything. One session, done. Her relationship transformed, even though it's a continuous effort, because she was like, you know what? All this bullshit, whatever, let's just park to the side. Darling, I'm terrified of you leaving me. That's what she would say. And all of a sudden, he stepped up and he was there for problem solved, right?
I think in relationships, when you can call on, or like even on your own, when you can call out your fears, the fear no longer holds power over you. You take your power back, right? Like when you call out things that you're worried about, the anxiety, all of that, like for me, that's what's really given me my power. Like I'm just like, this is who I am, this is where I'm at. And it's not just transparent, but it's vulnerable. It's very, very vulnerable in the way that I share. But I do it because one, it gives me my power back. And two, I think permission for others to also be okay to like not be a highlight reel. It could just be, this is a real situation. So I think there's like, as well, like when you take accountability rather than the blame, and that shopping list is all blame. It's all being a victim into it.
It's all blame. And you know what the thing one of my mentors says, which is very controversial, but I'll share it anyway. He says that when someone doesn't have the tools to help someone, they whack them with a label. So if a teacher is not helping a student learn how to spell and that kid is not spelling properly, they will label that kid as educable or mentally retarded or disabled or whatever it is because the teacher doesn't have the skill. But maybe there is a skill. Maybe there is something, a different way to teach that kid that all of a sudden he's not going to be like that. You know, all of a sudden he can spell. So I agree. I agree with what you said. And by the way, you're amazing at your vulnerability and sharing your stuff. Like people really connect through vulnerability. They connect through the sensitivities of life. You know, when everything's amazing and life is good and we're smooth sailing, you don't connect deeply. But when when you can share this part of you, which you've been amazing at and a big advocate for, you know, expressing how you feel and letting people in, like it's such a beautiful thing. And more people should do it. Because even for me in my journey, one of the hardest things was just to admit that something was wrong. And that was the first step. And then telling someone, hey, something's wrong. Sounds simple, but it's so difficult because there's so much conditioning and, you know, being a man and childhood and all these things that we have to look after everyone else and and a lot of the time we sacrifice ourselves for the other. And so it's so hard just to say, I'm sad, I'm angry. I can't even be angry. I'm happy, even being happy. I'm so happy. No, well, what if they don't really like that? I was
Mm.
telling these guys in the mastermind, it's my birthday next week. And I was like, for the first time, I'm going to like actually want to celebrate. It's taken me 38 years to celebrate myself on my birthday because the whole time I'm like, someone goes, everyone asks me, what can I get you? No, 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 nothing. I don't need anything. Don't need anything. Don't need anything. Don't need anything. Language. Don't need anything. I don't want anything. I've got everything. It's such bullshit, but it's a story that's been keeping me stuck because I'm so used to looking after everyone. And so because I'm so used to looking after everyone, to protect myself from not getting let down, I don't need anything, because if I tell you I need something and you don't give it to me, I'm going to get hurt. So it's funny, like even me, I'm on this journey, almost 39 ripe years of age, and finally allowing myself to celebrate on my birthday. And I'm going to everyone like, I want this from you, I want that from you, and I want that from you, and I want that from you. If you don't get it from me, fine. Okay.
Yeah. But Dean, you give so much to others. You have like I've just watched your brand grow and grow and grow. You're doing such phenomenal work in this space. And anyone that just even wants to, I think, go through self-discovery or understand their relationship with others and self and the world more, they need to reach out to you and follow your content. Every single video that you post, I'm like, yes, that lands. And so I just, yeah, you've been so helpful. I want to wrap up with a few just final sort of bits and pieces and questions. One is this podcast is called The Authentic Me, and I've always ended it with, what does authenticity mean to you? Now, I've written your answer here from 4.5 years ago, but I'd love to ask you and then repeat back what your answer actually was. But so Dean, what does authenticity mean to you?
Two quotes come to mind straight off the bat. One is Carl Jung, the greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become who we truly are. And Michelangelo, when he was carving out the statue of David, they asked him, you know the story, they asked him, how did you do it? You took a concrete block and you turned it into this magical statue of David, you know? And he said, well, I just removed everything that wasn't him. And those two quotes tie into what is authenticity. Authenticity is to acknowledge who we are beyond the insecurities, beyond the patterns, beyond the conditioning that we have. And when we can start to unravel them in the moment of awareness, choose different things, we start to reveal our authentic self.
I absolutely love you just so much. And I'm so excited because I feel like I'm actually getting to meet you this month. I'm going to make that happen because I'm coming up to Gold Coast, as you know.
Yes.
So that will be just a sensational time, just like two old souls catching up. Your answer 4.5 years ago when we first did this podcast, which you have stayed so true, was it means unraveling everything that you think you are or who you're supposed to be and show up in your true essence. Show up in a way that you don't mind how other people think of you.
Wow, that's cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I
I think
just
I need
thought
to go
that
re-listen to that one. Maybe I'll learn a thing or two.
it was so powerful. And I think because I re-listened to it just last night, you've offered so much perspective. I think I've grown so much and you've grown so much over this course, but we become deeper meaning-making machines. And I think your ability to serve and help others is why we've stayed connected all this time, and to be able to have just such a rare, honest, heartfelt conversation with you. And very evidently that I'm going through some stuff and some challenges, and you've just always offered me a fresh perspective, and you always give me hope. And I think that's just the best way to leave people where they are, and you've always just provided hope. So I really sincerely want to thank you and appreciate you for the work that you do, and thank you for having this conversation with me today.
You've given me goosebumps. I appreciate you, Mel. I struggle being in the spotlight and I just feel so comfortable. You have this art and knack of making people feel seen, valued, understood. And it's not an easy thing. We live in a world, especially in Australia, where there's tall poppy syndrome. If someone does well, they want to chop them down. But I think the beauty and why I value you as a friend is that you really see someone for who they are and you help build them up. And that's why I love doing that mastermind with you as well. You are so good at building people up when they're going through a difficult time. So I value you. I thank you. And I just hope that, you know, even you going through a difficult time and anyone else going through a difficult time, just be kind and gentle to ourselves. It's so easy to want things to change overnight and to get over them. And, I know we speak a lot about tools and beliefs and, dismantling, but I think just being kinder to ourselves along that journey. And then the tools are easy to come by. It's the hard part is just being that support network that we need for ourselves. And after that, everything will happen.
Thank you so much, Dean. Guys, if you love this episode, please do a screenshot, share it across our stories, tag me and Dean Blankfield to the episode so that we know that you're listening, and let us know in the comments what your key takeaways were. Until next time, stay well. We love you.
Thanks, Mel.